this microphone? Do you want to say hello?
Hey.
Okay. Hey.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Great. So, I would love to introduce these people, but I think they're better off introducing themselves. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and your favorite thing to have olive oil with?
I'm Ibrahim. I hail from Iran. In my young teen years, before the Iranian Revolution, I'm part of that diaspora of refugees. I've lived all over Europe, West Asia mainly. And my life has been in academia, and my connection with Palestine is really the struggle in Iran and how closely it's connected with the struggle with Palestine. More recently, in the First Intifada, I had a role at the University in Leeds, and I've been very active in the BDS movement, part of the organizing committee.
Favorite thing to have olive oil with?
I love olive oil nearly on everything. Salads. My normal dressing is olive oil, preferably Palestinian.
Hi, I'm Tanya, and I'm currently based here. My connection to Palestine has been that in the past I worked as a fellow with Al-Haq, one of the major human rights organizations that is now under U.S. sanctions. And I continue to work closely with a range of colleagues from the organization as well as those who have worked closely with them to submit UN Special Rapporteur reports and continue advocacy as the genocide continues. My olive oil favorite food would also be everything. Pita, hummus, bubble ganoush, everything. So yes, all of that. Over to you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You hear it? Yeah. They say in Arabic, Salam alaikum, Sabadikap. So, my name is Osama, Dr. Osama ODE from Palestine. I think 36 hours ago, I was in Palestine, traveled to Jordan, then from Jordan via Oman to Bangkok last night. Then I'm here. I'm happy to be here with you. So, thank you. I brought you some olive oil from Palestine. You will have the opportunity to taste it and to see it in the table there. And of course, with our main company, Make Sense Company in Bangkok, Konsuana, she's around, and she's the distributor of our Bidya brand olive oil. So this is myself, and maybe we talk about details afterwards. So the boss can say who is talking first.
What's your favorite thing to have olive oil with?
Just plain olive oil with bread. Hot bread will be perfect to eat.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I introduced myself, but my name is Kashi, or Cake, is my Thai Chulen. And I'm from Chiang Mai for Palestine, and we're a volunteer-run group. Many of you today made this happen, so thank you all for being here, for helping out, and for our panelists for joining us today, all the way from Ramallah. So I think it's best that we start with our individual views of the context as it stands with the genocide. So from each of your perspectives, what is the single most important thing to highlight right now about the current situation?
Okay. Well, maybe I came from the heart of the events in Palestine, not in Gaza, but in the West Bank. First, allow me all to express my deepest thanks for all of you about your concern and care about Palestine, because what is happening there does not touch Palestinians only. It's a matter of being human or not human. And our sister very well said and introduced, I was telling my friends that I never heard such a similarity of the core issue in Laos, Palestine, other nations. How the powers of evil, the big giant, let's say, as sometimes people name it, the 3% capital of this world, how they try to monopolize and control the whole world. And no matter how millions of people they kill, how many countries they destroy. So the core issue here, our sister, she put a historic presentation of Balfour Accord. Balfour Accord was made for Palestine in 1917. Means 128 years already. And what is the Balfour Accord? As a result of the First World War, Great Britain occupied Palestine and became one of its colonies. And when we look deeper into the issue, there was a lot of giant capital money behind the British colonization and other colonizing powers. Now this capital somewhere is in the United States. So, do you know who make the Balfour Accord? Balfour is the name of Foreign Minister of Great Britain. He gave it to whom, personally? Anybody can answer me? Who was the one who make this Balfour promise or official allocation of so-called Palestine, which is colony of Britain? They gave it to some people. Who is the one who got this agreement from Great Britain? You don't know? He is Rothschild, the Rothschild family, the Jewish Rothschild family with their money. They got this because they loaned the money for Great Britain and they wanted compensation for that. It's a matter of business. They deal with us nations as a business. So as once Madeleine Albright, when they attacked Iraq and they lied on the United Nations, they wanted the oil, they wanted their interest there. When they told her 1.5 million people were killed on this attack of war, they said, oh, it's a reasonable price for our interests. Nowadays, what is happening in Palestine, what happened in Laos, and happened in many countries, the power of money all over this world is behind it all. And they find excuses. This is promised land, this is interest of our country. And no matter what, they will find an excuse and they put it as a real fact. And according to that, they start doing what they are doing. Anyway, this shows that the so-called Israel or promised land, nothing to do with the real interest of being a base of American interest, Western interest, to execute it in the Middle East and to control the whole Middle East as a very rich area and a center point of the world of traffic and transport. So they want it as their for interest. Once they lose it, then they will go for other places. So Palestine as a land, it's a land of history, thousands of years ago. And being a land of religions on the Middle East, Jerusalem as the holy city for Muslims, Christians, and Jewish. And we have Jewish, Palestinian Jewish as well, a small, maybe 3-4% at that time. Now they come from Europe, they come from Russia, they come from Ethiopia, and they say this is our land. And this is absurd what they are doing. So, as we know, every country in this world, there is a nation where they live in this big piece of land named Thailand, named China, named whatever, Russia. Usually the scientists of psychology and anthropology, a nation is a big group of people living together in normal conditions, hundreds of years in a big, vast land where becomes their country, and they have common language, common habits, common traditions. This is the formation of nations. So coming after 2,500 years, where some tribes of Ibranis or Jewish tribes who came from Egypt to Palestine or through the prophets, and claiming this land is ours after 2,500 years, if we have to do so, we have to check the priority for the whole world to organize it. Like, for instance, the Arabs and Muslims occupied, let's say, or took Spain for 700 years, Andalusia and so on. And they stayed not 50 or 80 years, like the Jewish tribes who are welcome to stay in Palestine, the real Semitic tribes, not the others who name themselves Semitic, they stayed, the Arabs and Muslims, in Spain 700 years, and just 1,000 years ago they left there, or even less. So they can claim Spain for them, much before than the Jewish. The Red Indians in America can say America is ours, the same natives of Australia. And if you put a Q on the wall, on the back of the end of the list comes these tribes of Jewish who claims Palestine for nonsense. Anyway, back to the other side. I don't want to speak such things much about it. Let's go to the olive issue, olive trees. Our brand here in Consuana name it Bidya. Why Bidya? Bidya is the name of the village from where I was born. Bidya is about 60 kilometers north of Jerusalem, 25 kilometers to the east coast shore of the Mediterranean. This word originated from the Aramaic language 2,200 years ago, which was spoken by Prophet Jesus, Jesus Christ. This is the native language of Palestinians at that time. Bidya or Bidda means the heavy stone for olive crushing. And in our village, there are places around in the village where in the rocks, in the small mountains, there are excavated circular cylinders there, which name Roman beds. In our village, we have very, very old olive trees. These olive trees dates back to more than 2,000 years ago. We name them Roman trees, from the days of Romans. If we look into the history of olive oil, it is believed that olive tree started its travel or journey around the coast of Mediterranean, starting from the eastern coast of Mediterranean, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, and there it came to south of Europe, north of Africa. So 7,000 years plus ago. So we are proud to say that we are one of the origins of the oldest olive trees in the world. And the olive oil we bring to you here in Thailand is part of this, let's say, granddaughters and sons trees of the old olive trees that we have. The sad issue that when you see such a tree, which is more than 2,000 years old, and all of a sudden, a settler coming from Ukraine comes and they just cut it. They kill the history of people, the history of the whole earth, and they make attacks against nature, not only against humans. So these trees are the library of olive trees in the world, and they are still surviving there. So the bond between a Palestinian person and his land and his olive trees, it's not just a physical one because he gets money out of it. It's through generations. And you notice the old people, how strongly they are tied to the olive trees. They consider each individual tree like one of their sons and their daughters. And really, the devil or the evil of the aggressors or the settlers, they want to make these trees, they cut the bond with the land through demolishing the trees of olive trees. Nevertheless, people still standing there. And a few days before I came, I passed near a village. I know them very well, these people, back to my city, Ramallah. And the next day I see in the news how many trees they cut there. It is really sad to see what is happening with the settlers. The last few months, they uprooted few thousand olive trees. And when you speak about Palestinian territory of the West Bank, the olive production area, it is not that big. Our West Bank territory where we live, the other side is Gaza, where the massacres are taking place. But West Bank, now it is on the focus of aggression, daily aggressions. About few thousand trees were cut out of certain area, which is maybe 10% of these olive trees in one village named Al-Mughayr near Ramallah, and in other places. Total tens of thousands of olive trees were uprooted by Israelis. We have generally total of 10 million olive trees in the West Bank. When you speak few hundred thousands olive trees already cut, and when you look on the obstacles they put, not necessarily to kill every farmer, to cut every tree. When you are making aggression, you can do it slowly and repeatedly, like making you bleeding all the time, not necessarily to execute you on the spot. This is the danger of what the Israelis are doing. And when they say on the other side of the story, we do not make problems for Palestinians. They can produce, they can live, they can export. We allow them to export. But when we bring our olive oil to Thailand or to Malaysia, I live in Ramallah, and to the west part of Ramallah, I can see the Mediterranean shore, where means the Israeli territory. And the port of Ashdod, they name it Ashdod in Hebrew. It's an old Palestinian city in Israel. It's about 60 kilometers from Ramallah. And there is the green line where Israel side and Palestinian side. To go to the port of Ashdod, we have to make transport of our goods by a truck. We are not allowed to bring the container to our territory. And the truck or lorry gets the pallets to the Ashdod area. It should be an Israeli one. They charge us 5 to 10 times more than the local truck because we are not allowed to go there. Then we stuff the container with the pallets in the Israeli side. Each pallet to lift it and put it into the container by an Israeli company, it costs just to lift and put into the container $100. Means 10 pallets, $1,000. And the truck another 1,000, 2,000. Then the sea freight, which is less than 1,000, from port of Ashdod to port of Chiang in Malaysia, for instance. About 10,000 kilometers, less than $1,000. And the 60 kilometer, more than $2,000. So they say, you see, we give you the opportunity to move, to travel, to export. Like if we are, say, staying in Bangkok, north of Bangkok, you can go to the Lem Chabang port of Bangkok, south of Bangkok, but you have to pass it through Chiang Mai. That's pure traffic only for you. So you can imagine what problems and obstacles they put us. This $2,000, Ramallah, Ashdod, 60 kilometers. It is in Port Klang, Kuala Lumpur, 60 kilometers. It costs $200 to bring the container backwards or frontwards. The same from Ramallah to Port Ashdod. But it is not 200. In our case, it is 2,000. That's why they suffocate us with economy. They suffocate us with regulations. I called Kunlek yesterday, the day before. I am coming now. I am on the borders between Ramallah, between Jericho and River Jordan. I was standing in the bus there. It should take 5 minutes to pass to the Israeli checkpoint, then to continue to Jordan side and to Amman. We stood there 2.5 hours, simply because the checking point was there. They decided to make it slow movement, every half hour, one bus, something like that. So this is the kind of, let's say, soft oppression they are making. They do not mention it, but it is there. So they want to change our life into a hell. The other thing about this, they managed to attract a lot of farmers to work as laborers in Israel. Israel is over-subsidized. And maybe you remember, after 7 of October, few even Thai workers were working in Israel. Why? Because Israel is an over-subsidized country. Its GDP or income, $560 billion a year. For 10 million people, it's one of the richest countries on the world. Sometimes they brought laborers from Portugal and Spain, to Europeans to work as laborers in Israel. So their goal is to distract people of caring of their land. And slowly, they fight agriculture in Laos, in Palestine, in Pakistan, everywhere. And they want to divert people to take their roots from the land. Instead of raising tomato, it's easier for you and cheaper to buy ketchup from the factory that we are working. Afterwards, they take the land, they take the country, they take the proceeds. Now we see how Americans are trying to, in the Caribbean, I think Venezuela, one of the biggest country on oil reserve, not olive oil, petrol, they try to attack it under the so-called narcotics or whatever. Of course, this is a reason, fake reason to do what they want to do, as our sister from Laos mentioned very properly here. Anyway, this is just one side of the story about Palestine. And if you allow me 5 minutes or afterwards to show olive oil.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll do that later.
Yeah, okay. Then we do it later.
The most important thing to
Yeah. So I think perhaps for those of us who are outside of Palestine, one of the most important aspects to consider right now is the fact that there is a complete continuity of the settler colonial occupation and genocide. There is not, despite the so-called ceasefire that has been put in place, it's a reassertion of the occupation of the land, and the conditions of genocide within Gaza continue. We know that the humanitarian aid is not being let in by Israel. We know that people continue to be bombed. There are still thousands of people in over 10,000 people, up to 12 or more, still in Israeli jails, thousands of people who have been disappeared, and there's no news of their whereabouts, thousands of Palestinians, that is, by Israel. The shipments of arms continue to go to Israel from abroad, from the US, from Canada, from Europe, as well as from Asia. And we also know that the attacks against the farmers, now it is olive harvest season, as was mentioned, and right now, the past couple of months, this has been the highest number of attacks on Palestinian farmers that continue, and by Israeli settlers, as well as protected by the Israeli occupation forces. Recently, there have been also, in terms of food security, those who used to fish off the coast of Gaza are still not allowed to fish the zone where they used to be able to, even though it was very small. It's still barred for them to be able to go out very far, and if they do, they're shot at. So in terms of people being able to even survive, the struggle continues. And so I would just say at this point, we still need to remember that we need to continue to mobilize and to continue to listen carefully to what is happening on the ground, what Palestinian journalists as well as human rights defenders on the ground are reporting, and to take the lead from them, to step up all that we can do in terms of the boycott, divestment, sanctions work that we're doing here, but also looking into what are in our own spaces, whether it's a university or whether it's our workplace. How do we continue to raise awareness and talk about these issues with our colleagues and continue to push for an end to the genocide, an end to the occupation, and for all states, including where we live, so right now Thailand, but also to abide by the calls of the International Court of Justice, which is for third states to put full sanctions on the military trade, as well as to make sure that there is no aiding and abetting of the illegal occupation of Palestine by Israel. And so those would be the most important aspects for now.
So I think it's difficult to pin it down to a single highlight. There's been so much that has changed after October. But I think in its historical context, what is most significant in the last 2 years of daily slaughter, a child murdered every hour for 2 years, delivery of a bus full of children dead at the end of every week. That's the magnitude of the violence. Now, I recollect my great-grandmother, who I said goodbye to in the mid-70s in Iran. That level of violence has to go back to the British colonial days, where 30% of the population disappeared in less than a year. They walked among the dead. There was cannibalism. We read a timeline here with the history of Lao. We had a constitutional revolution in Iran in 1900. The same year, that socialism won in England the birth of the Labour Party. That constitutional revolution was overthrown violently. We had women having the right to vote being overthrown by the so-called progressives of the West. Not the Conservative, the newly formed Labour government. For me, and the same thing repeated, the first regime change that we see today through Libya, through the slaughter of Syria, what's going on a daily basis in Syria is heartbreaking. It's hardly on the news. Our grandparents saw that violence. Our mothers saw the violence of the first regime change in 1953. Mossad set up the secret service that took my teachers out of their classrooms as a child before I left Iran. I no longer say Israel. It has no right to exist. It can only be US-Israel, and certainly since 1973, US imperialism has taken hold. It's no longer the old vassal state like Britain. They did their job in the earlier part of that century. So now I look at my children. I reflect back on my great-grandmother. And I think the biggest singular change that's apparent in the last 2 years is the savagery of Western liberalism. It has always existed. It's hidden behind a cloak of freedom, of sexual expression, of all the rest that you see in that propaganda game, the consent. We are the most moral army in the world. We just raped our way through 500 villages. May have been valid in my mother's generation. It's no longer valid. The Gen Z will not buy that utter nonsense anymore. The level of violence is so huge. It's on every mobile phone. They could drag my teachers out of their classroom in silence and they would disappear. They cannot do that anymore. So the singular change for me is the men in suit are as barbaric as they were during the Balfour Declaration. They didn't even bother mentioning the word Palestine in their declaration. The UN recognized Israel, but the rest of the world didn't have the right to vote. It was still a colonial racist decision. That is no longer. And it's very, very welcome. We look to the Gen Z now to step forward. They will not be so tolerant, so abiding as my mother's generation, nor as my grandparents' generation. That, in a nutshell, for me, is the biggest change. Now, it doesn't mean the challenges aren't as great for this generation as they were for our parents' generation and grandparents' generation. But certainly, it has completely changed its character. I think they have miscalculated their brazen vulgarity, their savagery. And it's the West's savagery. We have to admit it. We have to take ownership, even as liberals, even as activists. We have to earn the right to despair. I don't think I have earned the right to despair for my generation. Because if we had, Gen Z wouldn't have to put up with the daily slaughter. It continues. It continues to this day. I think I can say enough for that.
Thanks for taking accountability for your generation. We don't often hear it. So I guess we want to hear a little bit about your individual experiences. Given that you all come from different types of advocacy, Dr. Osama, we'd like to hear about how olive oil is a tool of resistance, and I think you've touched on that to some extent already. But if you could tell us simply how olive oil can be a big tool of resistance, we want to know about it. Dr. Tanya, how has your work in the legal sector facilitated any positive change for the Palestinian cause? And then, Ebi, why don't you tell us a little bit about the BDS campaign and where we are now and what we can do and how youth activism can contribute to a free Palestine. So we'll start with you, Dr. Osama.
Okay. Thank you, Kochi. Yes. So just to continue small few words after my very well said friends here. When you look on the issue, even olive oil, it's olive oil or olive trees is a global phenomena or concept very well known all over the nations of the world nowadays. But we are speaking about humans, nations of the world. It's important to notice that we are living in a world where the humans are trying to stay humans and the unhumans try to make it backwards. Last night I had a nice dinner with my friend Chris, and we spoke about the situation like this. United Nations countries, about 160 countries worldwide, recognize the rights of Palestinians to have their own independent state. Historic Palestine, where Palestinians, side by Christians and Jewish were living, it's what is named now Israel. This historic land of Palestine, 72% of it is Israel, and they want to give them a little bit more. So it becomes almost 80%. And Palestine, only they want to give the Palestinians 20%. When the United Nations say so, the Assembly, General Assembly, well, the whole world is recognizing 22% for Palestinians, and you Israelis, you will get the 80%. Then the representative of Israel in the United Nations, who represents the 10 million Israelis, or 8 million actual Jews, he says, you, the other 8 billion of the world, are terrorists, and you are bad, because you give these people 20% of their rights. So they do not want any compromise. They want the 100% to be stolen. Otherwise, the whole humans of Earth become terrorists, non-humans. And their minister of local governorate, Israeli one, Smotrich, who came from Ukraine, he says, this United Nations must be evacuated from this planet Earth. And it always crosses my mind, who are these people? The Israelis, or the Zionist Israelis, not the peaceful one. You look at them, they are not humans against other humans. They are like aliens coming and accusing the whole 8 billion people, if they want to be their own people with their beliefs, humans, giving Palestinians 20%, 22% of their rights, you are terrorists. So they stole even the name of humanity and the concept of terrorism for themselves. So we have to admit, all of us here, are we humans or not? Are we Israelis or not? Because they are not the humans. They took the name of humans. And they say we are elected by Allah or God, the elected people. And I am a Muslim. We all know, our brother from Iran said, if we agree with this concept that Allah is in favor of 10 million against the other 8 billion people, then this is not Allah. This is a wrong diversion of God. This is not God. In Yahuwah, whoever, means this is the shaitan, the devil. So the God in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, in every belief, decent belief, means good, fair, human, everything. So they want to divert things and stealing the name. Now, regarding olive trees, they cut the olive trees which belongs to all humanity. Olive trees mentioned in Bible, in Quran 7 times mentioned as blessed, barakah, or very healthy food for humans everywhere. So even olive trees, they are attacked by them. Nevertheless, we're still surviving and we try to do our olive harvest and production. And there are so much bond with the history and with culture in Arabic, in Palestinian territory. In Spain, where hundreds of years Arabs make olive trees there and planted them. In Spanish language, for instance, the press, in Arabic we name it masara, or bad as we say, from bidya, the stone. In Spanish, masara, from the Arabic language, masara, like a pressing facility of olive trees. The zait, in Arabic, they name it acete in Spain. In our villages, I think Tanya knows birzeit. Birzeit like a well or container under the ground to reserve the oil. Birzeit, like a well of oil. Zeta, Zawata, Bidya, Asira, Biddo are villages through hundreds or thousands of years related to the olive oil. So we try to be continuing this history, and they try to uproot it up. So the olive oil is not just a commodity in Palestine. It's part of the culture, part of the civilization. And aside of that, about its features and taste and health benefits, olive oil in general, just to give you some technical issues, the whole world produces around 3.5 million tons of olive oil. Number one producer is Spain with 1.5, 1.6 million tons. Second, Italy, sometimes Tunisia, number three, sometimes Turkey or whoever. But this is a global production. Olive oil is used to be consumed mainly in the Mediterranean countries. But when the whole world knew about its features, I was in Spain in 1992 and got some statistics. In 1986, the biggest market of olive oil, United States, they imported 20,000 metric tons. In 1996, the imports of olive oil by non-producing olive oil country, United States, it was 120,000 tons. Nowadays, US imports about 8 to 10% of the global production of olive oil, 300,000 metric tons. This shows how the olive oil is becoming a real strategic food commodity in non-producing countries as well. So olive oil is a healthy, natural, blessed, you name it, whatever, and very, very important for human diet. You know, before in England, for instance, they did not knew about olive oil much. I was in London once and I look on the market and I was astonished to find tens of types of pickled olives there. Now, in England, which is not producing country, they become olive oil on the top 10 food commodities. Let's say milk, meat, or whatever, potato, olive oil as well. So olive oil is becoming a strategic commodity by time. And that's why we are proud to say that our Palestinian olive oil, not all of it, but the well-produced and trusted one with a trusted source of origin, is really having a lot of benefits. We once make analysis of the vitamin E, antioxidants and alpha-tocopherols and so on. And we found that it is 3 times higher than the average other extra virgin olive oil. So I don't want to make some advertisement for our olive oil, but I speak about general olive oil. Although our Ms. Lek, she is very picky with her decisions, she did not take this brand and used to distribute olive oil only after a very thorough checking of the quality and always checking the quality. I'm afraid sometimes not to send any mistaken olive oil for her. So we have a nice olive oil and we try to produce it no matter what the obstacles are there with the export, with the production, with the harassment of settlers. We try to do it very well. So can I just show them some sample?
Sure.
Okay. Can you? So this olive oil, I brought it with me. It was pressed 3-4 weeks ago in our stone press in Bidya. So when you speak about olive oil, according to International Olive Council, the so-called United Nations of olive oil, they determine olive oil extra virgin like this. It is the olive oil obtained from olive fruits, fresh olive fruits, by certain mechanical means like crushing, pressing, centrifuging, decantation. You can use water provided not exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. Means that's the name cold pressed olive oil. This is a terminology of cold pressed olive oil. In addition to that, the free acidity, the terminology of free acidity should be less than 0.8%. This is 0.5% free acidity. And peroxide value or oxidation factor less than 20, this is I think 8, less than 10 even. So in addition to that, to determine the so-called the king of oils extra virgin, you should have, additional to these characters, less than 0.83 acidity and less than 20 milligrams equivalent, and it's comply with cold pressing, no temperature, no chemicals, no whatsoever. It should have 0 defects on the sensory or organoleptic analysis. What does this mean? Means if you take this oil and you keep it 2 days under the sun, it becomes like heated or something. If you put near to it in an open container, a bad smell of even diesel or something, it will absorb smell, then it is defective. If you mix it with very old rancid olive oil, it will have rancidity or something like that. So this olive oil, we usually, when we taste it, there is a special cup, not this one, organized by International Council, which is wide from down and small from up, backwards. So usually you put a little bit amount of olive oil in that cup, and according to that, you should not be taking breakfast very early morning. I took breakfast 2 hours ago, so still can do tasting. You should not put so much cigarettes on that time. As a taster, take cigarettes, because you have to be relaxed in an atmosphere, in a chamber. This is the laboratory tasting committee. Once you have the cup small, you just warm it, or you warm it into 25 degrees. Sensory analysis, when we speak about sensory, we have 5 senses: touching, hearing, seeing, smelling, and tasting. Touching olive oil does not mean anything. It does not speak. You can't have it. And seeing it looks lovely. The glass should be dark blue glass, not to be affected by color, because color can mislead you. So after that, you warm it up and you try to exert the aroma of it, out of it. Once you make like this, you smell first. You can smell. You will get the positive greeniness or perceptions of the olive oil from the tree, from the kind of fruits, because there are about 1,000 types of fruits of olive oil worldwide. And each one has its identity. In addition to the basic component of olive oil, which is 3 fatty acids, triglycerides, oleic fatty acid, and other fatty acids, the main one is oleic fatty acid, there are about 80 other minor components: polyphenols, antioxidants, alpha-tocopherols. For instance, this is like green color. By time it becomes like golden color, coppery golden color, because of this is the dominating is the chlorophyll here, as you see. The chlorophyll is green matter. And there are carotene from carrot. It happens that chlorophyll oxidizes faster than carotene. By a few months, it becomes clear golden color or reddish golden color, because carotene becomes more dominating than that chlorophyll. And there is a company in Italy, they name it Gucci d'Oro, means the drop of gold, the olive oil, golden color. So the second most important is to taste, to classify the oil by its taste. You take a small sip. You, of course, pungency because of the quality. Why? When you take like that, you make it back through the nose to smell from inside as well. You find it battery, means intensive olive oil. You find it no defects, full defects. You find some attributes of green olive leaves, and sometimes from green tomato or whatever. And there is 0 effect, 0 defects. So the Americans, and the pungency from the fresh olive oil, not the very old one, as the Americans very well said in California Olive Council, the high quality olive oil is one with 1 or 2 cups. When you take it, you make once or twice. It means the polyphenols sharpen your pungency here. And the balance of bitterness is good one. So when have levels of polyphenols very high, means the olive oil is very good one. Usually the olive oils worldwide about 300 milligrams, 250 milligrams per liter of polyphenols, which results in the cup, antioxidants. This oil, I believe it is 500 plus. So these kind of features about how to assess the olive oil. One last thing, whenever you see the extra virgin terminology on the shelves, you have to double check. Americans did statistics all over the tens or hundreds of bottles extra virgin olive oil. And this solid fast, they found out that 70% of the name extra virgin was not extra virgin. And once another news in the Olive Oil Times, I got a message letter, electronic letter every 1 week. Germans are very clever and very picky on their quality. They bought a collective amount of 120 tons extra virgin olive oil from Italy. And the report says the following. By accident, some people checked for the high-end markets, premium extra virgin. Now there is a terminology of premium extra virgin olive oil. And there is even now ultra premium extra virgin olive oil, all about olive oil. So they found out that was cheated with some, I will not say Italian, but some mafia of business of olive oil, where they put soya bean or whatever oil with chemical essences and costed them €1 per liter, and they sold it €6. So they say in this report, the traffickers of olive oil, cheated olive oil, they make more money than narcotics. So because it's a tempting and say sexy commodity to money-wise to deal with it. So we have to be careful when we buy our olive oil. Thank you very much, and I hope you like it.
I think that was enough of a sell for you to buy the raffle tickets to possibly win this olive oil. Fine, Chris. Over to you, Tanya.
I don't know if I can follow such tasty discussions, but no, I mean, to look back in terms of what's happening right now in this region, we often talk about the shrinking civic space and the attacks on human rights defenders and the challenges that civil society faces here. And so I just wanted to then reflect a bit on the implications of this shrinking space on human rights defenders, organizations in Palestine. As I mentioned, Al-Haq, as well as two other major human rights organizations, Al-Mazen and the Palestinian Coalition for Human Rights, they were all sanctioned by the U.S. In September. And the reason for the sanctions is actually unprecedented, and it's because of the fact that they were submitting information consistently to the International Criminal Court. So the sanctions that have been put on them is under the executive order from the U.S. that relates to to trying to sanction and shut down the International Criminal Court, but in particular with the intention, really, to continue the impunity of Israel and the impunity of those states that continue to attack the Palestinians, and to also shut down the brave documentation that happens on the ground, both in Gaza and the West Bank and occupied Jerusalem. And I think what is so important to recognize about these sanctions is that it's not only right now, of course it is only right now Palestinian human rights organizations that have been attacked using this executive order, but we know in the region, for instance, that groups in Burma, Myanmar, have been also submitting information to the ICC, and so it relates very much to what could happen beyond Palestine and how these sanctions are being used. It also means that, for instance, it's not just the fact that it's American sanctions, but in fact it means that because the U.S. has such power over both the corporate world and the banking system, that right now these Palestinian human rights organizations cannot get funding to they can't receive it, and it's also very hard, almost impossible for their employees to be paid. And on top of that, they have most recently in the last week, the YouTube accounts as well as other social media accounts have been erased, or have been at least shut down, and some have been erased. So what this means is that it's a complete erasure of the documentation that has gone on for years by these human rights organizations. So it's also something that as human rights defenders in this region, we have to be aware of and recognize the complicity of the corporations that have regional headquarters here, and also what this could mean in the future going forward, and how we also have to work to learn from the Palestinian organizations, but also to support them in this time when they are at a point where it's going to be very difficult for them to continue the kind of work that they have been doing. I also just want to raise another issue that is very close to this region, is that many people may know about the Asian Development Bank based in Manila. They have recently accepted Israel as a new member. This is during the genocide. They accepted Israel as a new member of the Asian Development Bank as part of the European constituency. Now, what this means is that now the Asian Development Bank management has been actively promoting with Israeli companies the possibility to get contracts to build development projects in this region. So the first project has been approved just very recently. That is a solar project being built. Again, you can think of greenwashing here. A solar project that is being built with a partnership with an Israeli company that actually has solar projects, illegal solar projects in the settlements, in the Israeli settlements in Palestine. And so we know that this company is very much complicit in the occupation, and yet has gotten a contract with the Asian Development Bank to build this project. There are groups that are raising concerns about this, and the only response that we've gotten so far from the ADB has been that, in fact, they've replied to a letter that was sent actually by about 70 civil society organizations. The response back was that the provisions of the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court do not apply because they're not a country. And despite the fact that this is a public bank where the board is made up of members of our state, of all the regional states, as well as Europe and other donor countries. And so we will, with other groups, people are continuing to raise the concerns with at the Asian Development Bank, and to continue to say that actually these companies that already are that are Israeli, that have especially connections with the occupation, should not be getting contracts, and also that it shouldn't. That in fact, that just because they're not a country does not mean that they shouldn't be abiding by human rights principles. So there are many areas where we can see that although, yes, there are these legal provisions that have been put in place now, we have the provisional orders from the International Court of Justice, and also the International Criminal Court has the case of genocide going forward. Despite all of this, the impunity continues, and so wherever we are, just to again say that we need to find these connections and need to raise the pressure wherever we can, to also be aware of the levels of complicity and the levels of profiteering that continue to make the genocide and the settler colonial apartheid system and occupation still possible, and why we need to keep mobilizing. So maybe I'll end it there. Over to you.
So
to the question of BDS, or boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And I think the specific question was, why is it important for the next generation to pick up the flag, as it were, and move on? And I think the short answer for me personally was when my professional union, the University Colleges Union, finally, after a very, very long period, put out a statement asking for an arms embargo. I think asking for an arms embargo, you have to appreciate that in its context, because the whole thing about anti-Semitism and the control within education systems has been one of the priorities for the Zionist movement. It was extremely difficult to even have a meeting without being accused of anti-Semitism. That's the context in which that decision was made. And it is the largest union of academics within the UK. I think it was people finally realized that they cannot sit through the first Intifada without taking some kind of action. And eventually that decision came through. So that was a great highlight. On a more sort of looking to the future, it was north of England, Leeds, where I worked, has the town hall and about 15 minutes walk to the nearest market, literally 15 minutes. The highlight after the first Intifada was to see young teenage school children skipping school and lining up the full 15-minute walk from the town hall to the market. The interesting thing about it was the composition of that line. Young generation, multiracial. It's no longer the black community. It's no longer the immigrant communities. It's the indigenous population that now feels comfortable standing next to their sisters and actually holding a placard saying no to child murder. That for me was a turning point, and it was worth the decade-long sitting in meeting with 5 people talking to each other. It took the Intifada to inspire that, the first Intifada to inspire that. So I think that in itself, maybe I just spend about 5-10 minutes and put the BDS in some kind of historical context. I would look at it as the dark years of the Oslo Accord. The dark years of Oslo Accord was the culmination of Palestinian struggle that led to the dismissal of the Palestinians. Yes, we will give you 18% if you're lucky. Oh, this is just a dispute. It's not the rape and annihilation of 500 villages in the Nakba. You no longer exist. Finkelstein, the author and the activist, both parents in concentration camps under Nazi Germany, came out with a statement that even I had given up by the time of Oslo. It was an extremely dark, depressing time. Colonialism had won. It had won many times before. It took 1 million Algerians to get rid of the French. It took 9 years of bombardment on a daily basis in this region. It took international movements to overthrow those steps back and a step forward. It was that period. And so in 2005, women's movement, student movements, academics, the diaspora. I mean, I think one thing to recognize is that the majority of people that are the composition of at the time at least, was around 38% on the West Bank and Gaza. That's the population of Palestinians. Approximately 12% lived under the direct, brutal occupation of the Zionists. And around 50% were dispossessed in Lebanon, in Syria, around the world. And it took about a year in 2005 of consultations, of debate, of what do we do in these dark times? What's the step forward? And the conclusion was that we need that broad umbrella where PFLP is saying one thing, Islamic Jihad is saying something else, the diaspora is now looking after their children who are now teenagers through a generation of struggle. And how do we bring all of this together and bring some hope, some light? Instead of this dark depression, how do we turn it into a positive action? And BDS was formed. And it had three main principal objectives. It called for the end to the occupation. There was a lot of debate about the right of return. Famous intellects like Chomsky got involved, and it was never clear whether the right of return should be pushed or not. BDS adopted it. And as Desmond Tutu from the South African movement highlighted, you will never, ever have full freedom without the right of return. This is an indigenous population who's been occupied by a brutal occupation, by its full violence. Anything less is subjugation. Anything less cannot prevail. You will still be in slavery. You'll still be the second-class citizen. In the 90s, the CIA produced a report saying you must occupy southern Lebanon because you don't have enough workforce. The Palestinians would have become the slaves within Palestine to provide that workforce. These were the kind of plans they were working on, and they were succeeding. So that was one of the main demands. The second one was the end of the military occupation. The second was the end of apartheid, the racist segregation. It was quite different from South Africa. So they decided that the type of embargo, the type of sanctions they wanted was more fit to the Palestinian character. Of course, they had their own experience. Strikes against the British goes back to the 1900s. It's nothing new in Palestinian society and Palestinian struggle. But they learned from South Africa. They learned from the civil movement in the United States, where its mistakes were, where the successes were later on. Luther King was assassinated when he realized the mass movement of all in that movement, not just the minority of the blacks, the workplace, where it really does affect things directly. That's when they saw him as the biggest danger and they killed him. These lessons were there and they were clear. So the right of return became a part of that, one of those, and the end to the apartheid regime entirely, the total dismantlement of it. There's no halfway solutions here. You cannot sit and be a partner with a colonialist who wants to subjugate you. There is no equality. There is no future in that. So those two demands were then recognized by the entire community of Palestinians and later adopted slowly throughout the world. For me, there's the first 20 years, and then there's October. And then there's post-October. October, for me, is not just Palestine. We are all Palestinian is not just a slogan. You see the effect of what Western capitalism and imperialism is doing throughout the world. Losing Palestine is like losing India to the colonials in Britain. It's the freedom in the entire regime. 1953 was the first regime change in Iran. They overthrew 1900 was the timeline. We saw Laos' timeline. It coincides because it is an international policy. Palestine is one instance of that, and it's the people who are taking the brunt of it with Sudan right now are the people at the front who are fighting the same struggle that our grandparents fought, that our parents fought. So 53 was the first regime change, and that policy has maintained and existed ever since then. It was followed up by the murder of Luamba and the death of democracy in Africa. They gave us that message loud and clear. Liberal West will not entertain you having democracy. It's too good for you. You are savages, you are subjugated, and behave, or we will murder you. And they did. So when it came to 2005, it really was that lesson of South Africa that said, it's not just armed struggle, it's not just mass movement against colonialism, but in the kind of post-colonial wars that we had. This would be an avenue, a progressive way to not be in despair and look to something much more positive. And it built very slowly. And there was a lot of debate that, oh no, you should drop down the right of return, it's not practical and so on, by very prominent liberals. But then came October. It came the first Intifada and then the October. And now every mobile phone is broadcasting every violence that occurs. They cannot control it anymore. And suddenly, that 5 people meeting turned into a town hall meeting where the room was full. People no longer would accept what is being done in their name. And this was the cry of the slogan of the BDS movement. We know our struggle. We bury our dead. These are realities that we understand. We live with it. What we want you to do is to take ownership of what's been done in your name, in your community, in your society. We don't want, oh, you there, how impoverished you are and how helpless you're being. We don't want sorrow. We want you to recognize that you need to earn that right to despair. Earn the right to despair. It is your tax dollars that's paying for the bombs. It is your society that's living with the fact of a child murdered every single hour for 2 years. Do something about that. I remember in the early days, there was a delegation of South African youth movement that came. And somebody asked this question. Said, don't worry, but the reply from this young teenager was, don't worry about the racism in Soweto. Deal with racism here. Because since I've been here, I've seen it. That's the avenue to our freedom, to our emancipation. It's when your companies go bust because you're not buying their products. It's when your publicity stops the shameful banking corporation that's actually setting up illegal, under international law, illegal activities. It is your demonstration outside the shop that's promoting death. Zara was an interesting example in West Yorkshire where this activity, and day after day, people arrive. Mothers, already working mothers, will stop for an hour and hold a made-up baby with red paint. Because they felt it. They had an umbilical cord from their own child to the child being murdered every hour in Gaza. So the message then was, and once, so the period of 20 years of despair, I would say, was slowly building up. It had successes. But they weren't huge. They were hard won. It took a lot of effort. Immediately after the October and immediately after the bomb, what we knew the reaction of the Zionists. They've been waiting for this. They wait for every opportunity. They know how to wait out the president here and there. But they have their long-term agenda. The Zionists that arrived with the Irgun gang and the Stern gang, trained by the British, still have that agenda. They now brazenly, no longer talk about Israel. They talk about Judea. The entire South Lebanon is theirs. Half of Saudi Arabia is theirs. God promised it to them 3,000 years ago. I would like to have an opinion. That's how ridiculous it's become. And they're so brazen with it that when they take a rapist and put it on national TV as a celebrity, the person who exposed them, they raped the person to death, and he's on national TV. Finkelstein says even Goring under the Nazis wouldn't be so brazen. When they wanted to take 3,000 Jewish children out of France, they did it quietly. They tried to hide it. This bunch would film it and put it on TikTok. That's what they're doing. And the society is now sunk so low that these people are celebrities. Celebrities. This is 1930s in Germany. This is the rise of fascism and Nazis taking over. This legitimacy is now lost. I think they have miscalculated. This generation will not put up. It's too well informed. The Hasbara has lost. Their publicity game has lost. They recognize it. So after just to give a bit of hope, BDS itself, then in terms of a set of tactics, if you like, you can't see it that way. B for boycott, D for divestment, and S for sanctions. And it does build up that way. And there are three distinct set of activities. So a trade union like mine, actually, disinvestment and making out a statement is one aspect of it. Sanctions are at country level. Before October, if you ask anyone in that BDS meeting, when do you think the first action as far as sanctions is going to be likely to be? In what kind of time scale? You would have said at least 5 years, at least 10 years. Something has to happen. Nobody will. Within months, there's over, and I looked this up, 52 states that were considering arms embargo. It's just too much. The level of death we know has existed, but it hasn't existed on mobile phones before. The Americans learned their lessons with TV broadcasts in Vietnam. They were very well aware of it, and they've had policies to counter that. But what they don't have, and what they haven't caught up with, they're trying to desperately to do so now, is the modern forms of communication. So just to finish off and give some rays of hope, Colombia, South Africa, and Turkey, in the immediate sense, were the first brilliant examples of sanctions. Power production in Israel is still dependent on electricity, and the stopping of supply of coal, particularly from Colombia, hit that economy hugely. Intel, a blue chip company in an IT sector that's very right-wing, so are its investors, closed down a factory and the plans, and that was several $1 billion. The sort of movement you saw in the South African movement, anti-apartheid movement, when the churches joined in, the Presbyterian churches, the Methodist churches, they're extremely rich. They have large investment funds. They have started disinvesting. I joked with a friend that Oslo and the role of the Norwegian government at the time was disgraceful in the Oslo Accord. I think one or two of those politicians later wrote about their disquiet. Well, the biggest investment fund in the world divested from Israel. That's billions of dollars. Mendoza's is doing a series now. I think all three of them are on YouTube now. The Israeli economy is now bankrupt. There is no Israel. It's US Israel, certainly since the 73 war. It's no longer the vassal states in Europe. It's no longer the rest of them. It's an instrument of control in that region and wider now. It sells arms into every genocide. It backs up every fascist regime. There's a direct umbilical cord between what's happening in Sudan and Israel. So those things are huge, huge, huge wins, huge, huge wins. And the last few words, if I can, 1 or 2 minutes. So a way forward, I think, might be the next question anyway, huh? So maybe I'll talk about that there.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think there's some restlessness. If you could scream if you want to continue, or if you're tired, just raise your hand silently. That would be good. So 1, 2, 3, say woo if you're tired. Does that mean we want to continue? Sorry, my brain. Yes, okay. So I'll bring it back, and it's hard to say. I think what we'll do is we'll open for a Q&A instead. I think I just want to cover a little bit, 2 things. One, maybe we'll cut off the Western imperialists of olive oil, and that'll help. Hit them on their salads. And the other thing is that so in Thailand, we're facing a different type of imperialism from Israel. So we've become a safe harbor for IDF soldiers who have just killed Palestinian mothers and children. Some of you have been in Bai, some of you have been in Koh Phangan. And what that means is that we here are responsible for upholding basic human rights and Palestinian rights in Thailand. And it's not that hard, as Suvi and Tanya said. You follow the money and you find out where it hurts, where the source is. And I think it's well known, hopefully amongst us, that our government does send farm workers to Israel, some of whom were captured on October 7th. That's the type of advocacy that we're trying to do in Thailand to stop our government from that farm program. So in case anyone's wondering what we do in Solidarity Together, at the moment, some of our priorities include stopping the farm worker program and seizing it. It's to stop the settlement of Israelis in Gat Pangan and Pai. So these are some of the things that we try to do amongst the solidarity groups in Thailand. And finally, I think what we want to do first is thank our panelists for everything, for speaking and sharing their experiences, and open up for Q&A so that some of your questions can be answered about Palestine, about BDS, about the legal sector and how it can support internationally. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and we have an interpreter here, so you can ask in Thai or English. Any questions from the audience? Yeah. Can you say your name, if that's okay with you?
My name is Nikita. So we've seen a wave of recognition of Palestine by powerful countries, and we've seen protests in Israel against the government. And I want to ask you, Dr. Osama, if Palestinians feel the tide is turning, if Palestinians feel the tide is turning in the world in support of Palestine.
Yeah.
By recognition and protest.
Yes.
Through recognition.
Well, I really feel it very much, and no matter how Palestinians were disappointed from the so-called Arab Muslim world, to say it, our closest brothers, Muslims and Arabs around Palestine, who were just viewing things on TV in 2 years' time, not even following their relation of being Arabs like us, or Muslims mostly. This was very disappointing and giving you that you are alone. On the other side, we see how the whole world is progressing. If we assess how the world was brainwashed decades already, being implanted in their minds that Palestinians are terrorists. This kofiyah used to be like a symbol of terrorism of Palestinians, hiding the reality of being occupied since 100 years, the process of preparing for occupation and making Israel in 1948. So when you look on the Western mentality, they believe that they have the right to do it, and the others don't have the right. I just want to see how the education of young generations in the West, especially in US and others. I was first time in United States in 1997. I was studying in Moscow, my study there since 75 till 85. Then I made a trip to US, and I was taking the bus from Ohio, Columbus to New York to return back to Moscow. And the bus was coming from California all the way. And a young man there, sitting near to me, I asked him, where are you coming? I said, from Los Angeles, 2 days on the bus to New York. So I was curious to ask him, where are you from? I say, from Palestine, Jordan, Middle East. He didn't know where these countries. Then he said, Middle East. Then he told me something. The Middle East. You hear about Russia first? He say, well, yes, the Russians. What you know about Russians? They have atomic rockets. They want to attack us. That's the only thing he knows. I told him, well, your President Reagan at that time, and their president at that time, Brezhnev, they met in Geneva, and they make a so-called SAL 2, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 2, not to attack each other. And about Middle East, he said, I don't know, but there is a country there in the Middle East. This was in 77 or something, 79 or something. There is a country, we used to buy the oil very cheap and become not cheap. I told him Saudi Arabia, no, maybe other country. You say Iran, where the revolution took place. They have become bad for us. We used to get the oil very cheap, now becomes very expensive. So when you see such mentality of people, when you look Deutschland, my sister lives there, her husband, and they are a family, Dutch family. And Deutschland used to be $70 billion investment in Israel, the biggest country. And my nephew used to be on the very first months of the activities of this war, used to have one poster in the bus station or train station in Amsterdam, Anna Loer. She looks more Dutch because her father is Dutch, my sister, her mother. Hovering, I stand, I'm ready to answer any question about Palestine. Now, you see in Amsterdam, 250,000 demonstrators. The laws are changing. So we are confident and believe that the whole world is gradually and fast standing with itself, with the humanity beliefs. So recognizing is the political countries were oppressed by their people to recognize. And we need for sure more actions to follow. Look on the elections of New York. If it was not the Gaza war, I doubt he could have won Mr. Memdani there. And now there are more brave voices in US speaking about the right of Palestinians rather than just the solidarity, blind solidarity, make Israel great again. M-I-G-A, not M-A-G-A, as they say. So we are happy to feel, but the price was very, very big one. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Sorry, you have to come up here. Say your name too.
Thank you, Koshi. My name is Sebastian. I think I have a question in particular for our Iranian brother. So we've been talking a lot today in various ways, shapes and forms about structural violence, right? And I think it's really important that we throw aside that moral distinction that liberalism tries to internalize in us between direct violence and structural violence, and that sort of false moral hierarchy between the two. That's incredibly important. But then when you talk about the violence of liberalism, right, and how that violence is replicated and normalized, particularly within the West and within globalized neoliberal society, however we want to phrase it, and the sort of normalization of a racialized political economic world order. This is what you're elaborating very much. And so when you're engaging with audiences like this, right, how do you approach that question of how, as individuals, we are conditioned to see ourselves as innocent within that process? So, for example, you know, my phone here recording this, right? We all know the famous examples of the coltan will be coming from the Eastern Congo, from Lumumba to M23, and how that is all predicated. But, you know, if we look closer to home, in a country not too far from where we're all standing right now, I would say, for example, 70% of the agricultural workforce in this country is exempt from all basic labor protections, right? No minimum wage, no maximum hours, nothing, right? So in this country, not far from where we're standing, every meal that we eat, right, is brought to us through structural violence. And every time we are okay with that, we are enabling that process, right? Which is a very, very difficult thing as an individual to sit with, right? Because we are conditioned to want to live our best lives and, you know, prioritize our mental health and all of those sort of slightly insidious phrases that normalize this system. And I think that for someone like me and for many of us in the room, right, we feel that we want to be a good person, or we see ourselves as one of the good ones trying to make a difference from within. I've spent my whole career working in sustainable development, and it's been a lie. You know, I've been creating an alibi for the companies whose supply chains we make more sustainable, etc. Right? So how do you engage audiences, particularly sort of activist audiences, liberal audiences, on that issue of how you sit with discomfort and not to want to seek that sort of moral resolution, moral clarity, because I'm, you know, making some sustainable purchase decisions, because I'm an activist, I am one of the good ones, right? How do you, because that tendency is what allows the replication of exactly this system that you're discussing. Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned the tax dollars question, but that can seem like nebulous to people. So yeah.
You can use this one, maybe.
I think that's an excellent and a very, very taxing and important question that there's no clear, simple answer to it. I think I've lived a life of a liberal materially. And it's very easy to just be negative and feel guilty about it. The second thing I would say is I'm still not boycotting properly, despite it all. After 20 years, it's a process. It becomes a way of thinking, a way of life. I often say it's a bit like when you get in a car, you put a seatbelt. Last generation didn't, you do. You just do it as a matter of fact. And I know every individual that I contact within the movement has that shortcoming. It took years to close a bank account. It's not practical. And yet I know Barclays was directly involved. So what do? Do you not have money tomorrow out of your cash machine and not eat? Or do you... There are these practicalities. But I think more fundamentally is the recognition that we do have to take ownership of our violence. The slogan from the BDS is don't do violence. That's easy. You respect your neighbor, you respect your colleague, you respect people's rights. But they will do violence in your name. They will do violence in your name. You have hardly any choice in that. And it seems unsurmountable. But you know, just putting that Oreo and that Coke back on the shelf has cost Coca-Cola its business in West Asia. It maybe took an intifada to do it, but it also took all of those small actions. So I don't think the answer is to just be negative and feel guilty about being a liberal or having comforts. It's relative. You come out of that mindset when you recognize you are earning the right to despair. I mean, I wrote this down, and maybe I'll read it now. It's by Nadim Aslam, a young poet and an activist in the UK. And he's very much part of this movement. And he said, despair has to be earned. I personally have not done all I can to change things. I haven't yet earned the right to despair. I have no right to feel myself in the shoes of a Palestinian father carrying a bag containing body parts. I have no such right. But if it became part of my consciousness, if it became part of my practice in life, then I begin to address that liberal comfort and being part of this system. I'm doing everything I can, every single thing I can, not to be part of that, not to have the violence in my name. And of course, there's a scale. There are 5 wonderful people sitting in Belmar prison in London because they dared break into a weapons factory. I didn't. I don't think I should feel guilty about that. I should go outside the jail and demonstrate in their support. I can do that. That's my risk level. And I feel comfortable with that liberalism then. I feel comfortable that I'm not just being quiet. The first point is not to be in denial. The first point is to recognize the violence is in your name. And that's a huge step for most people. So the engagement normally and the practice of it is, I remember outside a supermarket in Leeds, 5 people will turn up. There are a group of women who stood there every Friday in silence. That's their way of dealing with it. They're ordinary citizens, working class people in Leeds. It's their expression to say, no, I'm not part of this violence. I used to wear a t-shirt saying, shopping at the supermarket kills. I wanted to be provocative. And I wanted people to engage with me in that provocation, to disagree with me, to raise the consciousness. There are many, many ways to stop feeling guilty. There are many, many ways to earn the right to despair. And it doesn't have to be go and sit in Belmarsh prison because you smashed into a weapons factory. That weapons factory, by the way, closed down. It's in North Yorkshire. And it was when local people, just ordinary local people, just went and stood outside and looked at people who walk in there with shame. It soon became so unpopular, and that factory in West Yorkshire is closed now. So we all have our relative risk levels. We all have our relative comforts. And I hope silence is not the answer. And non-recognition is not the answer. I think at that point you have to be quite aggressive and point out that, yes, it is us. We have to take ownership of it. I think that's all, really.
Did you want to add something? All right, maybe we'll do a final. Oh, sorry, Tanya.
No, it's okay. I mean, I just want to add one area around structural violence, and also, I mean, initially the question was around the legal system, but I just wanted to give one example that just a couple of weeks ago, there was an international people's tribunal on Gaza that was held in Istanbul. And it was done as an alternative to have a space to discuss areas of structural violence that do not necessarily always factor into the discussions around genocide. So talking about, with students, talking about the issues around, like talking about scholasticide and the annihilation of, from daycares to kindergartens to primary schools, secondary schools, universities, and what that means to an entire community and city and place, as well as people talking about, and women talking about repricide and what it's meant to reproductive health. Farmers and people who fish, and speaking about the ecocidal implications. Also, how that doesn't factor in so much when we talk about just the overarching considerations around genocide. And politicide, the real shutting down of civil society and the chill on civil society leaders and what that means, and assassinations, as well as disappearances. And so in terms of really recognizing that there are these other aspects of structural violence, but also making sure that that we also recognize that in these other aspects that we talk about that are happening in the occupied West Bank, in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, that there are reflections of these similar patterns of genocidal and structural violence in the region, and ways we can make connections, again, like was made in Laos, and what we can discuss what the pushback against the military junta in Myanmar, and the implications of the situation there. And so really just trying to recognize that wherever we live, that there's these common struggles that, again, we cannot be silent, and we need to find those commonalities and find a way to build solidarity from our hearts and not just in words.
That was so beautifully said that I think that we might end there. I want to say thank you so much to our panelists from near and far. And as Dr. Tanya said, as people living in Thailand, as Thai people, it is extremely important that we keep our solidarity grounded. We keep it cross-movement. We end the genocide in Myanmar as much as we end the genocide in Palestine. And we continue to fight for freedom for all of us, whether that's taking down ADB for their solar investments, or it is buying olive oil from Bidia. And so what we're going to do is we're going to let Chris finally call the raffle. Chris. Yes, 1 sec. One more second.